welcome all to this last and the third and the last summer programs that Friends of Schmeeckle had developed this summer for the first time. So thank you for taking time to come today. I'll talk a little bit about the Friends group. We have this particular group, if you're not familiar with it, it's called Friends of Schmeeckle, and I have some brochures here that I can pass around if you're interested in joining. We do quite a few programs. There are bookmarks coming too. There are quite a lot of programs like this, family programs like the candlelight hike, and also we have quite a lot of other activities like we have an annual photographs, art and writing contest that anybody can participate in. So if you're interested, that deadline is coming up in November. These photographs on the wall that you see are from the last year's contest. But if you are a painter, or if you are a quilt maker, or if you are interested in any type of artwork, or writing like poems or essays about Schmeeckle, that contest is actually a great thing to participate in. So just wanted to let you know. Without any further ado, let me introduce our speaker today. Paul Skawinski is the Citizen Lake Monitoring Network educator at the UW Extension Lakes at the College of Natural Resources at UWSP. And he also, in addition, teaches an aquatic plant biology at UWSP, and he also is the vice president of the Botanical Club of Wisconsin. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Soil Science and Waste Management and a Master of Science in Watershed Management. And he's also an author and a photographer, and he obviously, I saw a little glimpse, fantastic photographs. He has authored a book called Aquatic Plants of the Upper Midwest. The second edition was sold out. He said it's out of print and sold out, so he's probably going to be working on the third edition at some point, yes. And he also actually helped Schmeeckle quite a lot by heading the restoration project of the pond area. If you're driving by the baseball diamond along the road, you can see that little pond on the right side. And there was a lot of invasive plants that were taking over in that pond area, so he actually headed that particular project to introduce native aquatic plant and restore that particular pond. So he has helped Schmeeckle quite a lot already also. And he also started working on converting lawns into planting native plants of Wisconsin, native plants of Wisconsin in 2013. And that is something that he's going to talk about today. And he's also planning, if the weather hopefully favors us, at the end of our presentation today, he has very graciously invited all of us to visit his wonderful garden. So without any further ado, Paul Skawinski.
Right, so I'm very passionate about native plants. I worked with invasive plants for about 15 years now, and at some point I got tired of the same old story where it's just something that somebody planted in their garden that is from another country, and now it's all over the place. We look around Schmeeckle and we see Japanese honeysuckle and Japanese barberry and European buckthorn and Eurasian milfoil, and all these things have something in common, right? They have this word before their name that describes where they're from. We have an issue in North America, well, really worldwide, with not being satisfied with what grows here naturally. We have to have something that's from another country for some reason. But it's interesting when you look across the ocean, for example, with irises in water gardens. The yellow iris is very common in North American water gardens, which is a European species. In Europe, the North American blue iris is very common. But for some reason, we can't be happy with the blue iris here, we're happy with the yellow iris there. We have to ship them across the ocean. So it happens all the time, but what I really would like to see is more natives being used on the landscape, so we don't have to worry so much about these invasives constantly getting out and causing all these problems. If there were no invasives in Schmeeckle, I'm sure Jim's job would be a lot easier. Buckthorn and barberry and milfoil and everything are really huge issues here. So I'm here to try to convince you that native plants can be used in landscaping just as well as anything from any other country could be. So I'll talk a little bit about prairies in general, and then talk about what I've started doing on my own property, which is about a 1/3 acre parcel in the city. I'm over by Pitcher Park and Bucol Park on the west side. So if the weather is cooperating, then we can actually go over there later on and see. So a backyard prairie, to me, is just a low-maintenance garden, really. It's just a flower bed, but it happens to be full of native plants and typically has a mixture of flowers and grasses and sedges. When I say flower, I mean showy flowers. Sedges and grasses flower too, but large showy flowers. Typically, native prairies will require almost no watering. Once they're established, they really require nothing, but they will require a little bit as you're introducing new plants. If you put a new plant in the ground, just like if you were to buy anything from the store, you want to water it a few times so it gets established and it can take care of itself. They don't require any fertilizing, and they require very little maintenance, especially after the first year. And why natives? We already talked about this a little bit, but native plants have a much lower likelihood of becoming invasive or causing any kind of problems. It's much just safer to use them. Ecologically, they have a lot more value to birds and other wildlife. There's all kinds of great reasons to use them. So I very much would prefer using those over anything that's not native. If we are able to go to my yard later, you may see a few things that are not native to Wisconsin. They're native to maybe Illinois or Minnesota or something like that, but I won't plant anything in my yard that's from another country. If it's from a neighboring state, I'm okay with that. For certain reasons, like if I'm trying to attract a certain butterfly species, and their host plant is a plant that's native to Minnesota but not Wisconsin, I may have that species, because really our focus is attracting butterflies in our particular prairie. So you might see something like that. So why would you want a backyard prairie? First of all, aesthetics. Backyard prairies can be extremely showy and pleasing to the eye. When people hear the word prairie, they often think of grass, and it doesn't have to be a ton of grass. And I would encourage you actually to not use a lot of grasses in small scale plantings like urban backyards, because the grasses often can be fairly aggressive. They will take over small gardens fairly quickly. And your neighbors may think that it's just your lawn that you forgot to mow for the year. So using flowers makes it look more intentional and more pleasing to most people. And that's important in order to get people to really accept native plants as alternatives to these exotic species. We have to make it pleasing to most people. So that's something that we strive to do at home. Reducing lawn maintenance was a huge thing for me. I hate mowing the lawn, and a lot of people do. I would prefer to be playing rather than mowing the lawn. So I'll talk a little bit more about how we decided where we were going to cut lawn out of our property. But lawn mowing is expensive, and it takes a lot of time. I have a couple of friends that actually just retired and moved to a new house, and they put in no-mow lawn on one side, and they put in a prairie on the other side, and they gave away their lawnmower. And they were very happy to tell me that. They just gave it away, they don't need it anymore. So that was cool. Wildlife value certainly is a great thing with native plants and putting in a prairie. Butterflies, birds, bees. We've had pheasants. I don't know where they come from, but we've had pheasants in our yard in the middle of the city. Certainly deer come, and they eat some of the plants. There's enough of them there that they don't seem to make a huge dent. But we get all kinds of interesting wildlife to come. And then privacy, that's part of the backyard. What you see on the right is the gravel path that's about 3.5 feet wide that is for my kids to go in there and get lost, intentionally. They can't walk all the way through it to the neighboring yard, but they can walk right into the middle of it. And the path actually loops all the way around and goes past the little pond and stuff and comes back to the yard. But they can go in there and they can think they're getting lost or getting away from us. and they'll usually come out with a toad or a beetle or something cool, which is great. And you can see the privacy that it affords us from the neighboring houses and the RV over there and things like that. So instead of looking at all those things, we're looking at the flowers and the birds and stuff instead. And of course, water quality improvements, especially along lakes and rivers. This is a huge one. The water that falls on the ground and runs off the surface collects grass clippings and leaves and other organic materials and soil particles. And all that goes into the storm drain and leads directly to the river or a lake. And it carries phosphorus, which is the major nutrient that feeds algae blooms in lakes and aquatic plant growth, nuisance level growth of aquatic plants. So you end up with something like this. And this is apparently some sort of neighboring green lawn contest or something going on there. They both mow their lawn all the way to the water's edge, and they're just striving for the greenest lawn in the neighborhood, I guess. But when the rain falls down that slope, it just runs straight down and carries all that fertilizer right down to the lake, and you can see what the lake looks like. It'll feed that filamentous algae and other nasty algal species. So where should you put it in? I have a few ideas. I think they really can be installed anywhere. There's plants for clay, there's plants for sand, there's everything in between. So you don't have to worry about having the right type of soil for a prairie because you can put it anywhere. I think that wet areas are great, or areas where people have a hard time getting lawn grass to grow. Just stop trying to get lawn grass to grow there and do something else with the property. And one option would be to just put a prairie in or something, some sort of planting. Anywhere where you have a view of something that you don't like, if it's a road or if it's somebody's 4 old cars that somebody's got sitting in the backyard that you don't want to look at anymore or whatever, that's a great spot too. You can choose some tall plants for that purpose of screening a view like that. Putting something near a patio, we have a raised berm next to our patio that is meant to be a screen, but it's also meant to be an extremely showy area because it's right next to the patio. We like to have all those flowers right there next to the patio when we're having dinner out on the patio or something. So put it somewhere close where you can appreciate the beauty of the prairie a lot instead of putting it far away. And especially in our case, we routed all of our downspouts right into rain gardens. So our rain gardens sort of grade up into prairies, and that's how we got a lot of our diversity, is because we had these different moisture levels and sun exposures and things. But putting somewhere where you don't have to water your plants at all because you have downspouts watering the plants. And the deep roots of the prairie plants can actually help infiltrate the runoff from your rooftop instead of sending it to the storm drain and feeding phosphorus or other pollutants into the river. Joan Nassauer from Minnesota came up with these things called cues to care, which is basically ways of showing the neighbors and other people that look at your property that you actually care about this, and it's actually intentional. It's not just a pile of weeds, this is an intentional planting. So even if you have a lot of very dense plants that are very tall and they look sort of weedy and a little out of control compared to a very manicured planting, you can use things like borders to indicate that you really intend to have this as a garden, and it's contained within this border. And it looks very neat, and neatness is just something that appeals to humans. That's just a reality. People like the look of neat things, freshly cut lawns and straight lines and clean borders. If you have a sidewalk or a driveway or a walkway or something, putting shorter plants on that edge is a good idea, just because they won't topple over into the walkway. On my property, I pulled the garden up to within 5 feet of the sidewalk, but I stopped there because if I had any plants that did fall over in a rainstorm or something, they wouldn't be in the way of people and being a nuisance on the sidewalk. So if something does fall down toward the sidewalk, I'll usually go and just clip it off, because that's facing the road and it's the most public view of the prairie, so I try to keep that edge kind of clean to keep most people pleased. But putting shorter plants there will prevent that from happening in the first place, and they'll also tend to hold the other plants back from falling over. Put more flowers in and fewer grasses, because again, people look at a lot of grass like it's just unmowed lawn, so more flowers are better. If you put a birdhouse or a bat house or some sort of hummingbird feeder or bird feeder or something within the prairie, that also demonstrates that this is an intentional thing. You're trying to attract a certain type of wildlife, so there's really a purpose in all of this. Put in paths if you want to get people interested in this, and especially just to enjoy your own planting. Go in there, put a path in there so you can get in there. You can enjoy things better if you like photography. You can get in there better to photograph stuff. If you have kids, it's a great place for them to go. And another benefit of that is if you ever have a weedy species show up, some invasive or something gets in, it offers you an easy way in where you don't have to trample everything to get to something. You can just take your path. Something else that you can consider is trimming late blooming things like New England aster. A lot of aster species that bloom in September or October, if you trim them in June, you can knock their height down about halfway, and then they'll produce all these side branches and they'll bloom still, but they'll be shorter and bushier. Rather than being a taller, more floppy plant, they'll be a more compact, bushy form instead. So that's something that I do, or usually the deer do it for me before I end up doing it. They'll trim them down to a foot tall, and then they end up producing those side shoots, and it actually works out fine. Although Leopold had a relevant quote here that the landscape of any farm is the owner's portrait of himself. So people look at your property and they see you, they see that representing you. So certainly there's some pressure on people that have a neat property. Flowers are great, but keep in mind we live in Wisconsin, so half the year we don't have flowers. We have mostly dead things or dormant things. And so keep in mind that there's a lot of things that are interesting year-round, and looking for interesting berries or seed heads or things like that can be really beneficial, and it'll have a lot of interest through the winter when nothing is green or colorful. You can have red berries, or you can have interesting seed heads waving in the wind or something like that. Leaving dead stems provides a lot of habitat and food for birds and other wildlife. I tend to cut my things back in maybe mid-March or so when things are just starting to thaw out. Then I can get in and I can remove all the dead thatch and stuff without trampling any new growth. But it's a balance there. A lot of people like to deadhead everything, take all the thatch out in the fall, but then you're left with this barren landscape, and to me it's not very interesting. I mean, it's just snow, or if we don't have snow, it's just a bunch of brown dead grass and stuff. So I like to leave it out there, and it provides a lot of interesting textures and things in the winter. And certainly we have birds all winter long just devouring all the seeds off of our plants, so we like it that way. But everybody's prairie is going to be different. So what I just sort of alluded to, this is my backyard, I like it. You may not like it, that's okay. Everybody's different. So you should design your backyard to balance your desires. And in my case, I wanted to balance having a lot of flowers and wildlife with having a place for my kids to play and enough lawn for us to have people over and play games in the yard or whatever. So we feel like at this point we have a good balance between the two things. We have about 5,000 square feet now of native plants, and then probably 7,000 or 8,000 square feet of grass. I maybe would like to change them, flip those around, but for right now we're pretty happy with what we've got. So in 2012 we bought our house, and we asked ourselves what we wanted from our backyard. We had this clean slate, we have this new yard, what are we going to do with it? So first of all, we had moisture issues in our basement, so we wanted to manage the water. We had a couple of downspouts that were going right along the foundation. They were pouring a lot of water right there, and we had moisture seeping in through the walls of the basement. So we're going to figure out how to get that water away from the house, and we're going to use that, we're going to incorporate that into planted areas. We wanted a play area for the kids to play. Our kids are 3 and 5 now. We wanted to have vegetable gardens near the house. We wanted to have a lot of wildlife, especially attracting butterflies. That would be our focus. We wanted to do less lawn mowing, and we wanted to have a natural classroom for the kids to run around and explore. So how are we going to do that? we're going to use rain barrels and rain gardens to take the water. We were going to retain the lawn in the middle, put the vegetable gardens right behind the house by the kitchen, where it makes most sense to have the vegetables. And then in the back, we were going to put a high diversity of plants, and basically all along the lot lines, we were going to put all these plants. So we had a natural fence for the kids, and we also had all these plants. And we were going to remove the lawn from anywhere that was difficult to mow, and in our case, the lot lines really were the worst part. They were wet areas, they were areas where there were stumps and things like that. We had a big elm tree that got killed by Dutch elm disease, and we had that stump ground out, and then we had this gigantic area of stump grindings, which are not great for anything. If you run on that, it would just create all these pits and stuff, and it was just a hard area to do anything in. So we just stopped mowing it or doing anything with it, just planted into it, and then we don't have to worry about it. And we also wanted to create some paths for the kids to play. So we started putting in drain tiles. This is a 4-inch PVC pipe that you see near the top of that photo, and then all the way at the top you can see the downspout coming down the corner of the house. So we have a 35-foot pipe that I buried in the ground, and that takes the water from the house straight to a rain garden. You can see an angelica and iris and some jewelweed in the photo, wetland plants. And moving a little bit to the east, we have another downspout. We cut that right through along the rhubarb there. And this is before the actual rain garden went in, but there's now a rain garden here as well. So that pours out right at the edge. And there's a little trench behind it, so when that channel fills up with water, it spills into that trench and it actually runs along and waters the whole thing. Then again, just east of there, we have a rain barrel. We have a 2-inch overflow from there, and that leads to the other side of that rain garden, so it gets watered from two sides. If anyone here has used a rain barrel before, typically they're sold with these 1/2-inch overflows for a garden hose or something. We found that to be extremely inadequate. Anytime it rained hard, it would just overflow out the top. And since we had moisture problems in the basement already, we didn't want this overflowing rain barrel next to the house. So we went with a 2-inch pipe and just used a hole saw to cut the hole in the side of the barrel and put this 2-inch pipe in. And now I've never seen either one of the rain barrels over top, so it works really well. And on the other side, we have another rain barrel, 2-inch pipe that goes under that walkway, runs underground, and that's about a 40-foot pipe there that runs to another rain garden. So we have 3 rain gardens and 2 rain barrels. We have basically 0 runoff off of our property other than the driveway. That's the only place where any of our stormwater goes to the road. The rest of it is intercepted by plants somewhere. My son had the idea of digging a pond, so we did that too. And we actually dug 2 ponds. He calls this turtle shell pond, I guess because the shovel marks kind of look like a turtle shell, I guess, around the pond. So he was helping with his dump truck there. But our idea was once he had the idea, I thought this is a cool idea because if we had a wetland area, then we could increase the diversity of plants because we have wet areas, we have dry areas, and if you're trying to attract butterflies, butterflies often have specific host species, just like the monarch with milkweeds, fritillaries like violets, viceroy butterflies, which is the monarch, mimic likes willow trees, the American lady and the painted lady like pearly everlasting, and pussy toes, which is sort of a weedy species, but we leave it alone. But in order to attract the highest number of butterfly species, you have to have the highest number of plant species that you can find. You'll still get adults coming by to sip nectar from flowers, but if you want them to actually reproduce on your property, then you need to have a large number of plant species. So here we are at the pond, and then we also put up a shed, and I said, well, I don't really want to mow around the shed, so let's just take that grass out too and put in plants. So I had a gravel pad for our canoe, and then on the other side, the gravel is the Ninya, but under that flatbed trailer, we have gravel there as well, so that's a parking pad for the trailer. So I don't have to mow under the trailer, I don't have to move it to mow grass or anything. It just sits there and it's just rock. And there are no borders or anything around any of that stuff that I have to mow or weed whip. It's all just within the prairie. So The whole front of that area is all just gravel, it's all open, so it's not like my access to the shed is impeded in any way, it's just plants on the side. But that made it really easy for me, and the border that we put in, this is before the border was in, but everything is lined with just standard 3 by 6, I think, paving blocks, just like you see on a patio or something. So just bricks, basically. And it's just lined with that, and that's just wide enough for me to put a lawnmower wheel right up on there, and I just mow right along the edge and just run the wheels right up on top of the pavers, so I don't have to do any weed whipping or anything. I just mow right along that edge, and then it's done. I wanted to reduce my lawn mowing time as much as I possibly could. So then we need plants, and we had to ask ourselves, do we want to use plugs or we want to use seed? And this was kind of a tough call. You can see over here a couple of examples. These are plugs that we've grown at home this year. We were planning on doing a bunch in the front yard this year, but probably won't, so we're ended up just selling these if you're interested. So these are 4 species that are popular ones and ones that are sort of favorites of mine. This is a purple hyssop or an anise hyssop. It smells like black licorice if you touch a leaf or break a leaf. And it's just starting to flower here in the pot. If this goes in the ground, it'll be flowering soon, but it's a little stressed out right now in that pot. That's a great one for bees especially, and for skipper butterflies, which are these little, usually orange ones. They're like an inch and a half long. They look like little fighter jets. They've got these wings over the back and wings out the side. Neat little things. This is a native blazing star, or Beatrice. That's a common cultivated group, the blazing stars, or gay feathers. We have, I think, 5 species that are native to Wisconsin. This is a marsh blazing star, so it's a wetland blazing star species. We have a Canada wild rye here. This is one of my favorites, but I was recently told that some dog owners don't like this one because the seeds have these long awns, and especially in native large prairies where people are hunting, the dogs will, if they're really running hard, they're breathing hard, they can sometimes ingest the seeds if they run through them. So be aware of that if you have dogs or have a large prairie that you might have a dog running through. But it's a really neat species. This seed head will get probably this long, maybe more, and it'll persist all winter long. So it has a really robust, stiff plant with this big seed head that droops and waves in the wind, and it just looks really cool in the winter. And then this is a native goldenrod that's a stiff goldenrod. So it's not an aggressive species like the Canada goldenrod. This is a clump forming species, not rhizome forming like the Canada goldenrod is. So it'll form these large clumps. It has a big flat topped flower cluster. It's maybe 4 feet tall. And if you have honeybees or know someone who does, this is a fantastic one for that. Bees will be all over this stuff in August and September. It's also one that I see a lot of monarchs on. For some reason, some species, I never seem to see them on, and other ones I see them on all the time. So I have probably 40 or 50 monarch photographs, and I bet 80% of those are on either a goldenrod or a purple coneflower. They just seem to really like those two. So we were trying to decide between plugs and seeds, and plugs are very expensive typically. Those plants from native nurseries around the state would probably go for $3 to $7 a piece. Seeds, you can, for some species like a black-eyed Susan or something, where seed is easy to collect, you can get an ounce of it for $3 or $4. So that's a lot. That's probably many thousands of seeds in that ounce. But plugs are very fast to establish and seeds are slow. Typically that's the next growing season. You throw them out now, you're going to see them pop up next year. They have to go through the winter to break dormancy and they'll come up next year. Plugs will compete well with weeds because they're so big and they're so established already. As soon as you put that in the ground, the roots will spread out, the plants will grow very quickly, and they can shade out weeds or outcompete them. with seeds, they're all germinating at the same time, and weed seeds often grow faster than native perennial seeds do. So usually if you're planting a large prairie, the best thing to do is to mow the area for a whole year. Do it 3 or 4 times over that area in the whole year to just keep cutting off all the annual weeds. And the perennials are so small and they're so slow growing that you don't really cut them off. You set the mower as high as it'll go, you might run a few over with a wheel, but you won't cut them, you'll cut off all the weeds instead. That's usually what's recommended. In the case of a small scale garden, you could mow it with a regular lawnmower, or trying to weed it would be really difficult because it's hard to tell a native plant from a weed when it's an inch tall. So that can be really time consuming and difficult. We seeded a small area of our prairie back in 2013 or 14, and I actually gave up on it and I just scalped it all with a shovel and put in plugs because I was so frustrated with all the seedlings. I was getting a lot of black-eyed Susans and a couple other things, but most of the plants, as far as I could tell, were all weeds. I had a ton of plantains and thistles and creeping Charlie and that sort of thing. And they were growing so much faster than my natives that they were all getting shaded out. Unless I went back there every week or two to keep plucking them out, they just kept crowding them out. So I just decided, enough of this, I'm just going to cut them all out, sacrifice all those seeds that I put in, I'm going to put plugs in instead. And with plugs, you do want to water them for at least a few weeks. Every other day would be best. Seeds, you probably don't have to water. You might want to water them initially just to moisten them, but after that, they'll go through the winter, they'll be moist in the spring when they're ready to germinate from melting snow, and then they'll take care of themselves. The plugs, when you put something like that in the ground, they lose so much moisture because of all that leaf surface area. So if you don't water that, it'll use up all the water in those pots in a day, on a hot day. But a seed, it's got a little root and it's got maybe 1 or 2 little leaves. It doesn't lose a lot of water, so it can provide itself with enough water from that small root system to provide for those little leaves, and it can take care of itself. It won't grow more leaves until it can support them with those roots. So here we had a couple friends helping seed this area. We put in compost on the top of the soil to try to bury weed seeds, and we also wanted that to be a wetter area. We wanted to put in some more moist soil species in that area. So we added that compost. There's about probably 3 inches of compost on the top of the soil there, which makes a really nice seeding bed, and it also holds moisture for those moisture-loving plants. So we actually took a shovel and cut all the sod off of that area and got rid of that, took it to the city yard and disposed of it. And then we roughed up the soil with a steel rake to provide a nice bed for the seeds. Then I had some helpers putting the plugs in. This was easier. We did some with just simple holes, with a simple trowel, but you can see some of these areas they're drilled. So I used the auger here, which is just a huge drill bit. So you can just drill right in the ground and make lots of holes, and it's really fast to put a lot of plants in.
More power.
So that's my son and daughter there. I got that picture of my son, and then I actually snapped 2 photos in that sequence, and they were probably less than a second apart, but that plant is mostly out of that wheelbarrow because she took it. That's just how little sisters are. He was getting his plant ready in his wheelbarrow, and she came and grabbed it. So that's what it looks like after you put the plugs in. You can see how big they are, and if a little weed seed germinates now in that soil, it's got these big perennial natives that are towering over it, and they can tolerate those weeds at that point. Usually I weed an area 1 time after I plant. I'll wait like a month or 6 weeks and I'll pull all the weeds out, and then after that I don't have to weed it at all. The only place that I weed is around the very edge where there's enough light for weed seeds to germinate. But otherwise those perennials get so thick and tall in there that they shade the weeds out themselves, and they take care of it. I'm going to do this because I wanted you to see the back picture here. So what you see here is an area that I planted last September, And this is a couple of bone sets, which is a wetland, sort of a wet prairie species. There's a purple coneflower up there, a couple other plants that are in there. But then you see all this other stuff growing around those. That's all a little weedy plant called time-leaved speedwell. And it's a European species. It's introduced. It's not native here. But it only grows to about 6 inches tall and has no effect on the plants as far as I'm concerned, as far as I've been able to tell. So I don't waste my time weeding it. And you can see it's fairly invasive. I mean, it carpets the ground. But if I don't have to waste my time doing it and I can be playing instead, I will. So we'll go back to the other picture. So this is when it's in flower. That's that time-leaved speedwell again. It's a pretty little plant. The flower is really tiny. I mean, that's probably 3 or 4 millimeters across, that flower. So it's tiny. But there's often little tiny bees on there. And it's a pretty flower, and it has no adverse effects on anything as far as I can tell. So I don't touch it. I also leave wood sorrel. That one gets maybe 8 or 10 inches high. My natives get to 3 or 4 feet. So they just tower over that stuff and it doesn't bother anything. Creeping Charlie, I usually yank that around the edge once in a while, but for the most part I just leave it there. By this time of the year, you'll see when you go look around after this, if there is Creeping Charlie or time-leaved speedwell or wood sorrel in there, you can't see it anyway. It's shaded out. And typically, if you go down on your hands and knees and look at the base of the plants, there's no weeds down there because it's too dark. They shaded out everything on their own. So there's no need for pesticides or all this time weeding the interior areas of the prairie because it takes care of itself. The only thing I do have to worry about is things like thistles or horseweed or things like that, big tall weeds that are 5 feet tall because they can actually get to the light and they can compete with my native plants. But for these shorter things, it's just a waste of my time as far as I'm concerned. And the other thing I wanted to mention is that these things like the speedwell, they're carpeting the ground and they're causing no problems, but they're actually maybe helping me because they're preventing other worse things from being there instead. I could yank those out and then I might end up with thistles or something instead, and then I have to deal with that. So if I can just leave it there and it kind of helps me instead, then that's a great alternative for me. So watering, we sort of talked about that already. I would recommend the first month if you're putting in plugs. And after that, unless it's a real drought situation, you don't have to water them at all. They'll take care of themselves. So far in our yard, 2016 we had 126 species blooming. So we sort of keep an inventory by, I like to photograph them. So I take a picture of each one as it's blooming, and I get this phenology record for the year, and I also have an inventory then. So we put in over 200 species by seed or by plugs. 126 is what we actually saw last year. And we had 21 species of butterflies last year that showed up. So those are hard. Some of these butterflies they never seem to land, or they fly so wonky that you can never catch up to them or get a picture of them. Some of them blend in so well. So there may be more that we just never saw, but here's a few of the highlights that we saw last year. That red spotted purple in the upper right is probably my favorite. That's just a really pretty butterfly. That's actually sucking sugar from a split apple on the apple tree. My daughter loves catching toads now. So she has a toad house. Every time she catches a toad, she puts it in the toad house. It stays there for maybe a minute, and then it hops away. She's got some nice native landscaping going on. And we've been tagging monarchs as well. We tagged 24 monarchs last year in the yard. Usually in August and September. Actually, we had monarchs until the first week of November in our yard last year. And often I'll get home from work about 4:15, and I could catch 7 or 8 monarchs in the backyard in a matter of minutes. We have many monarchs at any given time in the yard, which is really cool for us. growing up, I always remembered it being really special to see a monarch in our yard, and now every day we have many monarchs all over the place, so it's really cool for me. My son found a garter snake this spring. That's a south-facing prairie slope that we put in. We had to redo our patio, and the contractor said, well, we have to put all new rock and sand underneath these pavers in the patio, so what do you want to do with the sand? I can haul it away, it's going to cost you to haul it away, or if you have a place to put it, it'll be faster and it won't cost you anything to get rid of it. So I said, well, just put it over here, just make a hill. It'll be the kids' sled hill. We'll build it up with snow in the winter, and we can have a south-facing prairie. I'll plant it with lupin and spiderwort and little blue stem and things like that. So that's what we did. We just incorporated that. We pulled the border out a little bit, made room for this hill, and then we had room for another pond. So my son and I got the shovels out. We made another pond. So we've had a good time, and we have a little snake house on that hill as well. We have some flagstone pieces that we got from a friend that he didn't want anymore, so it's a nice little south-facing basking spot for the snake. Blue spotted salamander, that was pretty fun. Teaching time, teaching his little sister about salamanders. Okay, and then the last thing I wanted to show is just basically, in case it was raining, I put this together that will show you all the species of plants that have bloomed so far this year in our yard. And it's sort of in alphabetical order, because that's how they were arranged. But you can see the diversity of different colors and shapes and the sedges and things that are blooming. So that's so far, as of today.
It's beautiful.
So I left some time for questions. There's usually questions about putting in native plantings, so we can take any questions now, and then if we have time, then we can certainly go check it out at my house. Yeah.
Couple questions. If you have a lot of shade trees, is that an issue? Because in terms of the sunlight? And second one is, I tried to get a few certain things growing around gardens around the edge of our house, things like coneflowers and black-eyed Susans. The rabbits love them, devour them, and then never see the end result.
Yeah. Yeah, we have a lot of rabbits in our yard as well, and in areas where I just put in fresh plants, sometimes I spray them with liquid fence, which is like a rotten egg smell, and they will leave that alone. You have to put it on maybe every week or so. It'll get washed off by rain.
Right.
That seems to work well for us. For some reason this year, the rabbits haven't really been eating most of my natives. They seem to really like that I leave the clover in the lawn. I don't tend to mow it maybe every 2 weeks or so. They'll eat the clover and the dandelions before they'll eat the natives. So I guess if you mow all that stuff off and they have nothing else to eat, they'll eat the natives instead. So it seems to me when I'm watching the rabbits eat, they seem to be going after the clover and the dandelions more than anything, as long as that's available. And then as far as growing in shade, we just put in a little shade garden this year to sort of play around with that, because most of our yard is full sun. But we have an area that only gets about 3 hours of sun during the day. And I put in a lot of sedges, Bev's sedge and Pennsylvania sedge, because those will fill in fairly well. And I wanted, this is next to a walkway, so I wanted it to be about 2.5 feet tall at the most. So within this blanket of sedges, I put in bottle gentians and cardinal flowers and some blazing stars and some really showy things that will be a little bit taller than the sedges. So it'll be this carpet of sedges that is fairly uniform, but then there will be these big spires of color that will pop out of there. So there are a lot of plants that will do well in shade. We don't have a lot of them at our house because we don't have much shade, but some great ones would be wild ginger or largely aster. Alum root is a common one, and then a lot of these little sedges will do well in the shade.
Is there any concern you have with like city ordinances or anything like that, you know, with removing lawn and planting this?
Yep, as far as I know, there's no ordinance in Stevens Point that's against it. The lot next to us is actually a city-owned lot,
Okay.
so they come by and mow the lawn and stuff, and they've never said anything to me. But I have kept in mind, every time I put in a new section of this prairie, I keep in mind what it's going to look like from the other side too. So I want it to look really nice from my side, but if it looks like a pile of weeds to everybody else, then they're going to have issues with it. So typically my yard looks better from the other side than it does from my house, because I spend a lot of time thinking about what it's going to look like for the neighbors. If I want them to appreciate it and accept it for what it is, then it needs to look pleasing to them too. We actually, on one side, we have a neighbor that mows, she'll actually mow the city lot if they wait too long, which is a week. She'll mow the whole lot. And so they really like lawn over there. But they have a 2-year-old daughter, and they spend more time against the edge of my lot than they do in their grass, because the little girl wants to come over and see the flowers and the bees and stuff. So I always tell them she is free to pick as many flowers as she wants, take a bouquet home, whatever you want to do. I'm happy to see her over there enjoying the flowers. And the same thing with the lot to the north of us. They have a 3-year-old daughter, same thing. Bring her over, pick the flowers, poke the bumblebees, catch the butterflies, whatever you want to do, you're free to enjoy it too. Then on the east side, they have a grandson who's maybe 2 or maybe 3 now. He comes over all the time, plays on the playground, walks down the path, goes in there, looks at the pond and everything. And it's just, we're happy to have as many kids as possible enjoying all the stuff that we have going on in the yard.
When you're first putting this together, how do you source the seeds and the plugs? Because there's so many cultivated versions, and things have similar names. So as somebody who's not a botanist, how would I know that I'm actually getting native plants?
Right. Yeah, there's a couple of native specialty nurseries. So where I started was at Prairie Moon Nursery, which is in Winona, Minnesota. And they have a lot of plants, but they also have a lot of seed. And I got most of my seed from them. And then there's a place called J&J Aquatic Nursery in Wild Rose. And that's where I got most of my plugs to start with. I talked to them a month or 2 ago, and they were already sold out. All their stock that they had is already claimed, so they had nothing left. And they raise like 1 million plants a year. But they supply DOT and these big contractors and things with big orders. So Dragonfly Nursery is in Amory, and that's where I've gotten a bunch of stuff too. Prairie Nursery is well known in Westfield. They only do online ordering, I guess, now. They don't have a store like they used to. There's a place, Stone Silo Nursery in Green Bay has a lot of natives now. Johnson's Nursery in Menominee Falls is a big one. So there's a bunch of places, and there's more. They're popping up often. Yep.
And is it better to plant in the spring or in the fall when you're doing that?
I've planted at all times of the year, except winter.
Well, the challenge then, you should be doing that.
So if you plant in the fall, to me it really doesn't matter. Right? The biggest challenge is in the summer, because if you plant in July or August, it's hot and it's dry, And the plants will do fine as long as you baby them for a little while. If you plant and you forget them, they're gonna die. They're gonna roast out there in the hot sun before they can get their root systems well developed. If you plant in the fall or in the spring, it's cool enough and moist enough that they won't get dried out really fast. And they can tolerate a little more, being left more alone. So I don't think it really matters. If you plant in the fall, a lot of the annual weeds are not really sprouting anymore. So you can get those plants established, and then in the spring when the annual weeds are germinating again, those plants are established already and the perennials will shoot out of the ground. So that could be one benefit. But I think it works fine either way. I've done it both ways many times and it's worked out equally well in my opinion.
Is that a recommendation for going both seeds or plugs, either way?
For seeds, you want to do it in the fall.
Okay.
A lot of seeds, you think about how they naturally would drop. They drop in the fall.
All right.
And they lay there on the ground. They stratify over the winter and under the moist snow, and then they break dormancy and they sprout in the spring. If you put them in the springtime, some nurseries will store them in dry storage, cold dry storage, so they never really go through this moist period that they need to break dormancy. And if that's the case and you plant them in the spring, they're just going to sit there all summer long and not germinate because they haven't broken dormancy yet. And then they're going to be sitting there waiting for a bird or a mouse or something to eat them. So a lot of them are just going to sit there and be wasted. So the ideal time would be to do it right before the first snow, because then the seeds are hidden from the birds. So throw them out there right as it's snowing. And then they get buried really quickly, and then they'll sit under there and they'll break dormancy and they'll germinate. Yeah?
Speaking of mice, I have a really big rodent phobia. Is this going to attract more rodents to the yard?
Rodents like seeds. We have a couple of meadow voles that live under our porch. I'm sure we have some in the prairie, but I never see them. I think they're busy enough and hidden enough that we never encounter them. So we actually encounter the two that are under our porch far more often. They run across the patio and run through the backyard, but they have to run, maybe they're running to the prairie, I don't know. But as far as within the prairie itself, I've never seen any in there. I'm sure they're there, but I've just never encountered them. So if they're there but you never see them, is that okay? Yeah.
If you have your own plugs done, like you collect seeds and you do your own plugs, typically how long on average, I know it depends on different species, but if I start put the seeds in the plugs for summer, how early should I start? How long should it have to wait till it gets to the plantable growth?
So those plants I collected that seed from my yard last year, and I seeded all those trays in October or so.
Oh,
And then I let them sit all winter long. They got buried in snow, they just sat out there, and then they germinated. And then I split them out into pots. And so I've got about 1,200 of those at home right now.
wow.
Preparing, I was going to use all of them basically this year, but we probably won't use any of them this year. So those plants germinated in March or April. I have a big cold frame that I built at home, which is a special kind of greenhouse that faces south on an angle. So it intercepts a lot of heat and it warms up quickly in the springtime. So I built that over the winter to put these trays into so that it germinates sooner and the plants would be ready to put in the ground sooner in the spring. So I have this enormous cold frame that's just absurdly sized. I can fit about 35 20-inch trays in this cold frame. And in March, I was getting temperatures in the high 90s in there. So these plants warmed up fast and they had things germinating really fast. So that's the process that I go through. I just collect them in the fall and then leave them and let the winter do its magic on them and they sprout on their own in the spring.
Even if it is completely outside, like without bringing it to your greenhouse?
Yeah, I left some of them outside too. So you can just leave them just on the ground or a table or whatever. You can just leave them out there, let them be covered in snow, and they'll thaw out in the springtime and they'll sprout.
So they don't have to keep it indoors at all then?
No, I didn't bring anything inside. I've started some seed inside, and then unless you have fans and stuff going on them, they get so weak and spindly, and it's hard to provide enough light for them. So you have these weak plants, you put them outside, and then the first windy day they all get blown over. So to me, it was easier to just leave them outside and let them grow up tough and strong right away. Yeah.
Thank you.
When you were talking about planting along your lot lines, did you go right up to the line, or did you leave a little
No.
gap of grass?
No, on the city lot side, I left 2 lawnmower passes. And on the east side, it is right on the lot line, but I still mow 2 passes over there for the neighbor. She doesn't really care, but I do it anyway just because sometimes there's a plant that falls over when it's windy or it rains hard or something, or maybe the neighbor doesn't like bees or something. So I do that just because I don't want to give anybody any reason to not like what I've done and have a problem with it, so I just do that. It doesn't take me much time to do it. Yep.
Do you have any books to recommend for native plants of Wisconsin? Because you've said so many names and I don't know what you're saying. I just don't know the names.
Yeah, I guess as far as flowers go, I would say probably wildflowers of Wisconsin and the upper Midwest, which is a color. There you go. She has it right next to you. Yeah, that's the first edition or earlier edition of the book. There's a newer one out now. But that's a really nice one. The photos are fairly small, but at least it gives you a pretty good idea of what you've got. It's pretty comprehensive as well.
Are there any apps? Are there any apps?
Probably. I don't know.
What is the name of the flower on the screen?
That's a cup plant flower.
Cup plant?
Cup plants are really cool, but they seed themselves very well. And if you have them in a small area, they will pop up everywhere and they'll dominate really fast. So I've actually had to yank a few this year just because there's just more than I wanted. So it's a really neat plant that'll grow to about 8 feet, and it has these huge opposite leaves that come together at the stem, so they form a cup that actually seals together around the stem. So we get goldfinches and all kinds of things that land right on the leaves and drink from the cups. So it's a neat plant to have, and the flowers are huge. That's probably 4 or 5 inches across. But if you don't pluck those seedlings, you'll end up with more than you want. Yeah.
What would you say are maybe your top 3 or 5 like showy flower ones that convince passersby that you have a good thing going?
The purple hyssop that I had over there is a fantastic one. It only grows to about 3 feet. It flowers profusely. It forms a lot of branches that all have a spike of purple flowers on the top. It's stiff, so it doesn't tend to fall over. And the bees and the butterflies love it. So to me, it's just an all-around workhorse. And then I'd say the blazing stars, purple coneflowers, black-eyed Susan even is seeds itself very heavily, and you'll get a lot of it if you put in seed of black-eyed Susan. So seed it lightly if you put it in, but I think it's good to use a couple of native species that people are familiar with because there's so many cultivars of these species. And when people learn that flower I love is actually native here, then they seem to give natives more of a chance. And the blazing stars are a great example. Beatrice is a huge name in the nursery industry, but we have lots of native Beatrice species, so why not use some that are native here? We have them from anywhere from wetland like that one is, the marsh blazing star, to the rough blazing star, which is like dry, sandy, barrens type habitat. So they go completely across the spectrum of moisture levels. So there's a Beatrice for every occasion. Well, if anyone wants to come see my prairie, you're welcome to. There's still a little bit of light left. So we'll wrap up here and just meet out in the parking lot, I guess, and go over there. So this is an area, there's a little spot here that was a garden before we moved in. And this is a European loosestrife. Garden loosestrife, I think it's called. So it's not native. Yep, that's butterfly weed down there, yeah. So this is one of the things that still is hanging on from the old garden. And it never moves because it's surrounded by things that are taller. So I don't really mind it that much. If it starts to spread, then I'll just yank it all out. But at this point, I see butterflies go to it, I see bees on it. That's not coming.
What is the bright pink one behind you?
These are two monardas. So this is our native monarda, and this is a monarda that's native to the south of us, just called scarlet bee balm usually.
Oh, it is a native plant then? I have some
Not in Wisconsin, but south of here.
Oh, I
How far south are you talking?
I think like southern Illinois, Missouri area. Yeah.
Do you have to do like any burning or like mowing to?
No, I don't do anything other than cut this out in the spring. All
How
the dead stuff.
short do you cut it? Like everything? You're like cutting this all
Yeah,
off?
I just do it by hand with the shears actually. You could use a power shears or something too, or a brush cutter or something. What's that?
In March?
Yeah. Yeah,
So
basically
March,
right when
every
this,
March you'll cut this down. How far are you cutting it?
within a few inches of the ground.
Okay. So you're not, what do you do? You break that off and dispose of it? So you're not worried too much about eggs and insects and things?
Yeah, so, yep, so some
Because they're going to be
bees will
laying
be in the
eggs.
ground,
Yeah.
and if you wait too long, the solitary bees that are nesting in the ground will come out. And then you can risk trampling them. So I try to get out there when the soil is still frozen or nearly frozen. There are some butterflies that their caterpillars will actually roll up in the leaves of old plants. That's how they spend the winter. So there's a chance that I'm cutting some of those off. Usually I'll take the pile of thatch and I'll just leave it right here for a couple weeks.
Okay.
And then if there's caterpillars in there, then the idea is that they would move out and go into the plants. I don't know if that happens or not, but it makes me feel good. So I do it anyway.
If you were overachieving, you could do like a third and a third and a third kind of thing. And
Yeah, but by the time I got to the last third, I might be trampling bees
Yeah,
and the caterpillars coming out of the soil and stuff too. So,
so you take shears out here to cut it.
yeah.
Wow.
You can just use brush cutter.
You could. Yeah, I just don't have one. Maybe I'll get one.
But you're just taking the dead stuff, right?
Yes, just the dead stuff. And anything woody, basically the woody stuff is all along the edge, just for that. We're going for a 3-story habitat here. So we've got the,
Now we can't. Yeah, what would happen to this? What would this look like if you did?
if I didn't cut it out,
Yeah.
some of the plants would just grow sideways here and there because they're growing around all the dead stuff. I don't think it would really be a problem, but I just do it because I figured my neighbors would think it would look cleaner if I do it. So I would.
Shows it's being maintained.
Yeah, I mean, I'm tempted to do that
Yeah.
and just see what happens. I mean, look at a natural prairie. If you go to
Right,
one
yeah, right.
in June,
Obviously, nobody comes down
No.
around and does that. Yeah.
no, and historically they would burn periodically to burn
Right,
some of that
yeah.
stuff out, but it wouldn't
Can't
burn
do
every
that
year. No. So I haven't actually tried burning it yet. Probably not a good idea. For every inch of rain we get. The rain barrel is a 50-gallon rain barrel over there, fills with 1/10 of an inch of rain. So it pours out in here, and this will fill up and flood into the yard. Some of the plants in here, like the bee balm and the cherry, these are black cherries here. They don't really need a lot of moisture, but they're doing fine. And then I've got some of the biggest irises I've ever seen. These are native blue flag iris. There's sweet flag in here. There's sedges, the meadow sweet here. This is a flat-topped aster, jewelweed, swamp dewberry. Lots of natives that are meant for wetland conditions, and they do great right here because it's so wet.
And that's
So-
from this rain barrel? This one?
No, that's from one over there. So this is the one that runs, it runs underground and has a 45-degree angle here, and it pours out into this jewelweed and sensitive fern here. So it runs along, that's my magnificent Joe Pyeweed right there.
Yeah.
The other downspout, that downspout runs right into the backside of that Joe Pyeweed base. So again, that fills up and it just spills out into here. But we've got plenty of room here for the kids to play around. I cut more than a half hour off my lawn mowing time since when we moved in, so I'm happy with that.
And you never do any watering?
No, except when I just plant something. So within the first few weeks, I'll water and then I just let it go.
What do you cover this guy with in the winter when it grows? The guy with the
The
triangle?
cold frame?
Yeah.
It's a frame made out of 1x2s that has a 5 mil painter's plastic sandwiched between 2 sets of
So the
1x2s.
sun goes through?
Yeah, but it heats up, and then there's actually 2 layers of plastic with an inch of air inside, so it's insulated. And then it's just on a hinge. Actually, 5 huge hinges that are on the
in the
back.
summer it's off of it, right?
Yeah, it would just get way too hot. Yep. So this is the patio berm that is meant to shield our patio from everything. If we're out here eating, the cup plants do a fantastic job, as you can imagine. The cherries are growing tall. There's a balcony over there, so it screens from that, and then all the houses over here. Nobody can see us on our patio, so we kind of like it that way. Sure. And then over here is the shade garden that we just planted this year. That's, I think early June I put that in. So it's mostly sedges.
Okay.
If you look at it, you'll see there is some little wood sorrel clumps and things like that. But again, I don't think it's going to be any kind of a problem, so I don't waste my time pulling them out. I pull out the horseweed and I pull out thistles and more problematic things. But the wood sorrel is only going to get to 6 or 7 inches tall. It's going to provide a bunch of little yellow flowers, and that's it. So I don't worry about it. If there are other questions, I'm willing to stick around and
Yeah, you're
talk.
home.
That's fine. That's fine.
Bring your own beer and
Can you talk a little more about removing sod? Because you talked about hand, but if you had a larger area.
you can make it.
Yeah, if I knew that I was going to do this initially, I would have used the sod cutting machine. But I just kept doing about 1,000 square feet at a time, and I just decided to do it by hand. And
Yeah.
it would be a lot easier to do it with a sod cutter.
The Prairie Nursery catalog has a whole description of how to do it. It talks about herbicide, of course, but it also talks about like plastic or cardboard. Is that a viable method?
I tried cardboard and it did not work for me.
Okay.
It got so wet and then it starts to degrade and the grass would still come through it. Or if it wasn't the grass, it would be dandelions and thistles and things that would come through it
And I
instead.
imagine the black plastic can break and
Yeah,
get
so
tears in it.
I had good luck with black tarps. I put those around the shed when I was putting that in. I covered that area with tarps. And if it was a thick black tarp, it worked at killing everything within a week or two. But if it was a blue tarp or a silver tarp or anything, the light went right through it and it didn't work at all. So you have to use a thick one and you have to use a black one
And
in
just
order for it
taking
to
out
work.
the sod manually, you don't have a risk of seeds left behind.
Oh, there'll be
You,
some.
you
but-
do, yep. So if you put plugs in, they're going to compete with the weed seeds.
Yeah.
The other thing that I did in that triangle where the pond is, between those two paths, we burn the soil with a weeding torch. And this was, again, sort of an experiment.
Yeah.
Weird idea. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. Let's see if it does. But the idea was to take this torch and heat the ground up to the extent that any of the weed seeds would pop or die or somehow go inviable. And it seemed to work really well. I weeded that once after maybe 6 weeks. That's it. Never had to weed it again. And it was mostly just wood sorrel that came up with a little bit of grass, crabgrass and stuff that came up. I did that again over here. When I put this in this spring, I burned the closer half here and I didn't burn the other half. And it was interesting that I got about the same amount of weeds, but I got grass on the burn side, weedy grasses, and then I got wood sorrel and creeping Charlie and stuff on the other side. So I apparently killed those ones, but I didn't kill the grass. And
Yeah.
grasses like fire for the most part, so I guess I'm not too surprised, but
No.
it actually didn't really help me out at all to do it in that case. It worked really well back there, but it didn't work here. So.
So get a sod cutter. And
Yeah.
moral of the story.
Yeah, and actually, if I got a new house, if I moved and I did this again, I would probably just buy a huge black tarp, like a 50 by 50 tarp or something, or a couple of them, and I would just put them out there for the season, because then you don't have to remove anything.
They'll talk about you for years.
Yeah,
That's
I don't know what he's doing out there.
So
Welcome
that
to
would be
the
the
neighborhood.
easiest way, because you don't have to remove anything. You just let it die under there and then plant it. Hauling all the sod is a lot of work. So, especially when it's wet. And our backyard is always kind of wet. And groundwater here is only a few feet down. So our soil is fairly heavy and it's always very heavy, wet sod. And it's hard to remove all of that. So easier to just kill it in place and plant into it.
Okay, that helps.
I was just impatient, so I didn't want to wait for the tarps. I just wanted to
Season,
just get it
yeah.
out of there and do it.
I was gonna say, I had luck small scale using just the plastic bags that you buy like soil in, like potting soil, because they were shaded like it's really dark green. So I just laid those down and tacked them in with some old sticks, and that killed
Okay.
small scale because I just had a few bags.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Okay. And you didn't have to remove the soil after that?
I didn't have to
It's
remove the soil. I
soft.
lifted up the bags and everything was dead, and then I planted over it.
Oh, cool.
But that was like a year because I knew I was not gonna get to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would leave it down for at least 3 or 4 weeks, a minimum. More is better. But with a really good heavy black tarp, that should be plenty of time. I know I've inadvertently killed parts of my lawn, leaving a tarp out there for a week in the sun, so it works fairly quickly.
Till the dead grass into the.
Well, if you tilled it, you'd be bringing a lot of weed seeds up. So I would just not do that. I would just leave it. And if you can't use a trowel because the roots of the grasses are in the way, just use an auger and drill the holes in.
But you need to do that for a whole season?
The tarp?
The tarp? At least a few weeks. Longer is better. I mean, if you know you're going to do it next year, put it out now and leave it there. And you know it'll be dead. Especially at this time of year, it'll die fast because it'll cook really quickly in the hot sun.
Cut the grass down really low before you put the tarp down? Or does it matter?
I don't think it matters. It would be less dead, potentially moldy grass under the tarp if you did cut it off first. But I don't think it would matter. I mean, you'd stress out the grass a little bit extra if you did scalp it toward the ground. But either way, you're shading it out, you're eliminating all of its light, so it can't make food and it's going to die.
I still like your flamethrower better.
It's fun, if nothing else. Yeah.
How big of a tank of propane do you go through?
20 pounds.
You go through a 20?
Well, it depends. I mean, for that triangle, that's about 400 square feet. We use maybe half a tank.
You still have the flamethrower?
Yeah. They're about $40 at Fleet Farm or something.
Yeah, they're much.
Yeah.
You're talking about the ones they use for cleaning, drying out things on concrete.
Like on a sidewalk or a driveway, burning
Before
things between
they-
cracks
yeah.
and stuff. Yeah. Yep. Yep.
No, I know what he was talking. I thought that's what he was talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is great. Thank you very much.
All right.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for coming over.